what came out, like in the projects I focused on, what came out so clearly is the tensions between the international definitions of these experiences, and then also the local understanding, the local conceptualization, descriptions, of these experiences. When we talk about, human trafficking, when we talk about modern slavery, we have a formal definition. And when you look at it, it makes sense, but when you go on ground and listen to how people understand some of these experiences, now in one of the pieces I write about cases, lived experiences of child labor in Sierra Leone, and you can see that the tensions are so clear. The definition of child labor, and it is defined and seen from a negative perspective altogether. But when you listen to parents, when you listen to community members, when you listen to the children who are like at the center of this debate of child labor, you really see that there is a need to get closer to the children and their communities for us to be able to understand, to make sense of the complexities that are part of, the concept, the phenomenon of child labor. So to me, the tensions between the international systems, the international frameworks, and the local systems and the local understandings that came out so clearly. And I found it so interesting in that we need to focus. Whose voice matters here? Whose voice are we fronting? Whose voice is on the table when we're defining these concepts? And also, when we are in the field engaging the children, the families, and all that, do we take like time to ask them to unpack these concepts, or are we just relying on the international or on the theoretical, perspectives? So I felt, it maybe for people who are in these specific areas when you're working on child labor, it is important to listen to all voices. At the end of the day, the survivors, the people who are living these experiences, they should be given the upper hand. They should be brought closer to the table so that we understand, why is there a gap between the intervention and the realities.
It's so interesting that you speak about the tension, because I think even at a very basic language level, the tension exists. The language that is used. So for one of the projects I was exploring, which was a hidden histories project in Jamestown, Accra, the investigators were saying that the community, when you use the word slavery, people automatically relate it with chains and shackles. So they do not see the word slavery as applicable today. So maybe if you use the word exploitation, that's another thing that exists, but slavery does not exist because the visuals, I think it comes back to what we've been talking about visuals and how we remember and interpret things. The visuals that are associated with slavery are, the images that we've seen with people in chains and shackles, and you go to historical sites and you see the remnants of the chains. So people attach the word itself to the visual and then make an inference on that today. So the issue of definitions is it's both psychological, it's linguistic, it's, how are we taking something that is so prevalent and trying to condense it into one standard definition, So it's very interesting. I think that this comes up in different projects, both in a contemporary sense and also in a historical sense, in how those tensions exist between international and local definitions. They exist between contemporary and historical perceptions. There's still a tension in which people are trying to separate these things, trying to see them as different. But I think, Sophie, we've had this conversation before when one of the things that you've said that really stuck with me is you said that what's contemporary about today's slavery? It's been happening. It's the same thing. It's a long line of the same thing, but we are separating and we're creating this divide that we're saying this is historical and this is contemporary, when in essence you're saying that the records and the experience of a survivor today and the experience of a survivor 200 years, 300 years ago would literally mirror each other, you know, in terms of the experiences. So it's really interesting, these tensions that are created and sort of are upheld and exist. Yeah.
And I think we come back to that whole full circle of storytelling, because the reason why we have the understanding we have of slavery, of chains and everything, is because of how we document and how we tell stories, right? It's because of how historical slavery was documented and was told. And in an essence, most of the practitioners who are working on trafficking and modern slavery right now introduced that word to sort of give a picture. And it came from like a very positive place. Like it came from a place like, we want people to know. It's complex, we want people to understand. But if people had explored enough and even understood that, even as you're saying, the documentation of the historical slavery that you're talking about was already flawed. Mm-hmm. It was already flawed to begin with. So your inference to it should be that it was flawed. And even if you're pointing out to it for correlation, you're pointing out something that was flawed. And I have really spoken against this whole sensationalization of human trafficking and slavery and all that, because there's just a need to shock people. To shock people that this is happening. And that sort of takes away from everything, because one of the things that actually the projects I was reading showed was this inability of survivors to reintegrate back into community and become part of the community because of the stigma associated with slavery or associated with their experience. And I don't think most of the time we think about that. We think about that when we sensationalize these issues as we do, what we end up doing is excluding the survivors, the victim, and making everyone see them as different, you know, and not really as part of us. As this, whatever is happening, as you're saying, exploitation is part and parcel of what we are going through. It's been part and parcel of humanity. From the beginning of humanity, exploitation has been part and parcel of that. When we separate something like trafficking and talk about it in the way that we talk about it and make it seem like it's so far away from, oh my God, this is happening. Like I get shocked, like when in reality, it cuts across our culture. We are losing a chance to really question our culture when we separate it and sensationalize it, because we are making it sound like only a few people are doing it. So for me, the whole storytelling aspect of it, one of the things that it does is not allow us to question how this is part and parcel of culture. Like it didn't stop. There's nothing, like apart from, realistically, apart from it being declared illegal, what really changed? People are still being shipped, people are still being stolen from their families, people are still working long hours, people are still going through trauma, people still can't reintegrate into communities. Like the experience of the people that are going through these things hasn't changed. So should how we call these things really change if that experience hasn't changed? And are we, I'm saying, changing those definitions to make it easier for us as a community to not question how actively our culture contributes to slavery and exploitation? So for me, it was really interesting because I feel like that's what definitions do. They kind of exclude it from our culture, put it in a silo for us to investigate and look at as apart from us rather than part of us.
Now, Sophie, you're hitting on something that many people out there would not want to hear. Culture. Culture is there's a way. How can you talk about culture in a negative way? How can we question culture? Culture is unquestionable. Culture does not change. So I do agree with you entirely that I think there is a practice of dividing or saying this period ended, the period of suffering ended. So there's a period of grace, a period of progress, a period of moving forward. This is something I have noticed or something I observed in the content that I worked on. There is a tendency of saying, oh, this woman or this man was going through, trafficking in Italy, in South Africa, and now we have been able to rescue this person. We have been able to take them back to their home countries, and that is all good. But you forget that, yes, one phase has ended, they're back, but the trauma, the suffering, it keeps on moving. It may appear in different, like it may have a different face, but that trauma goes on for this person. So you see that when we talk about reintegration, I think reintegration has been portrayed to be a smooth, uncomplicated. It is all good. When the person is taken back to their community, to their culture, they are embraced, they are taken in, they are supported, they are not stigmatized. No, there is empathy, but that does not work in reality. So yes, when we go back to question culture, I think many of us, being a Ugandan, when we talk about culture, it is something that you have to embrace, but you don't question. So yes, I think we are getting that point. I believe we are getting that point where we have to reflect us as individuals. What are we doing? What harm are we contributing when we're working with, these categories of people? Forget about the categories of people. Even if somebody has not gone through, human trafficking, there's another level, there's another form. They may be in their marriage, they may be in their family, but they're going through a form of trauma. So how do we go about, unpacking all these forms of trauma? It shouldn't be somebody who has been trafficked to Libya or another country, and then we make this person like an object to explain how bad the situation is. But look close to your neighbor. Look close, something similar is going on. So I do agree with Sophie that when we talk about culture, family, we need to look closely that trauma that we go through at a family level, at a community level, at national level.